Hi, I hope you're doing well, and welcome to this Microsoft Learn Live series. Microsoft Learn Live is a series of guided courses designed to increase your existing knowledge of Azure technologies. The idea here is to learn in a way you can apply the lessons to your own project. And today, we're going to talk about the Azure Health Bot case studies. We're going to cover on how this is being used in the fields with several other healthcare customers. We will discuss different use cases together with two of my co-hosts, Rodanthi and Gregory. Rodanthi, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Rodanthi Alexiou, and I am a computer science student in the University of Athens. I am a Microsoft Learning Ambassador, and I was part of the team that created the learning path for the Azure Health Bot.
Thanks, Rodanthi. Gregory?
Hi, I'm Gregory Lisiak. I'm a Director of Digital Health Strategy and Innovation. I've been at Microsoft for the last 2.5 years, working with health and life science customers for the last 13 years. And for the last 18 months, I've spent a lot of time working with healthcare customers around the globe, working with the Azure Health Bot and delivering solutions to address various issues related to the Covid-19 pandemic.
Thanks, Gregory. Two great subject matter experts. As I said, my name is Bert. I'm what they call a healthcare technology strategist. I work across Western Europe. And the last 4 years, I've been actively working with the healthcare bot, with several customers and partners to create better patient experience. This course is a module of 4 episodes. So if you haven't watched any of them, no problem. Feel free to go to the link on the screen after the session to learn how to build your first Azure Health Bot, if you don't know how to do that, or how to add scenarios, or how to enhance the health of your patients by clinical intelligence. Today, we will cover the final part, showcasing how customers are using the Azure Healthcare Bot. As I said, this is an interactive session. Feel free after the session to go to the link above to complete the interactive learning. Today, we'll cover this learning objectives. We will learn about real-life use cases through the United States, the Middle East, and Europe, and also understand the benefits to customers with real-life use cases. Don't forget, this is a live and interactive session, so don't hesitate to head over to the chat, say hi, we are monitoring it, and ask any question you might have. If we go to the material, we will answer questions as we go through. If we don't, we have a team of moderators with subject matter experts who will be answering questions in the chat. So don't hesitate, we love interaction. So without ado, a small introduction before we start with the use cases. The HealthBot has been used in the last year over 2 billion messages. So this is not a new product or new service. This is a well-established product that has proven its value. And the interesting thing is that healthcare providers don't need to start from scratch. They can leverage an already developed platform, which is GDPR and HIPAA compliant, where you can start from day one. We have customers who actually went from ideation to production in less than a day. You can start small and on your own pace. We have some customer use cases where we go to a journey where they went with a simple static bot, but went to a really interactive, intelligent bot. And we will cover different kind of use cases, such as triage, localization, or healthcare intelligence. So without further ado, I'm going to give the word to Gregory. He will cover the case studies for the Azure Health Bot service in the United States. Gregory, over to you.
Thanks, Bert. And so let's get started here. Minimize window. All right. So the case studies I'm going to talk about are related to the United States. While I worked with customers around the globe, I'm going to focus on a few of our health and life science customers that have used the Azure Health Bot for a wide range of the different use case scenarios. From a payer perspective, bots have been built in order to ask questions about claims information, and on the provider side as a patient engagement tool, help triage patient issues, including a symptom checker, finding appropriate care, finding physicians, and of course assessing risk for COVID-19 infection. So let's start by talking about the early adopters. So the Azure Health Bot became generally available back in 2019, and two of our early adopters, Aurora Healthcare and Quest Diagnostics, used the Azure Health Bot for similar but different situations. Aurora Healthcare created a bot that was designed to help patients review their symptoms, and based on the outcomes of the symptom checker, the bot would help direct patients to the appropriate care provider or care location based on the severity of their symptoms. And Quest Diagnostics did something similar, but it was more focused around helping patients schedule appointments and then finding relevant information quickly about the treatment locations of where they're going to be seen for their appointments. Another one of our early adopters was Premera Blue Cross up in the Pacific Northwest. They used their virtual health assistant named Scout, and Scout provided information to their members in order to help them find medical care, submitting claims, checking on claims status, inquiring on eligibility, and other health plan related information, reducing the call volume at their contact centers drastically with the implementation of the bot. Providence is one of the largest health systems in the United States, and actually was the health system that actually had the first U.S. COVID-19 case. And their health bot named Grace was developed on the Azure Health Bot service, and it was one of they recognized that time-sensitive need, and so Providence used their own clinical protocols, guided by the CDC's guidance around COVID-19, and developed a COVID-19 or coronavirus assessment tool in just 3 days, and had that deployed and operational for the communities that they serve. The tool helped people decide whether or not they should seek medical attention for their respiratory symptoms. And this scenario actually became the first COVID-19 related scenario template to be made available publicly in the Azure HealthBot platform, so customers around the globe could leverage that scenario template for their specific needs. And over time, the Providence team expanded Grace to include information about finding locations to get vaccinated, frequently asked questions, as well as using ML and AI. Trending topics was more recently added to their Grace bot in order to for their patients, in order to just see what are other people asking about. And so that information was actually based on the telemetry data from the bot in order for them to provide timely, relevant, and trending information as part of their Grace Health Bot. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention created their Clara bot and on the Azure HealthBot service. Clara conducts a more comprehensive triage for COVID-19 symptoms and risk factors, and provides information for people worried about possible infection, and provided information related to suggested course of action, self-quarantining, whether or not the individual should seek medical care immediately, and provide links to the local health departments. So each jurisdiction had their own guidance or variations of guidance on where to go, where to seek care, when to seek care, and incorporated even the guidance that was being provided at the time related to masking, and so that was something that the CDC's Clara bot incorporated all that relevant jurisdiction-based guidance as part of their health bot. And then the last use case I'll talk about here is Walgreens, Walgreens Boots Alliance. And here in the US, they go under the Walgreens brand, and they're a global pharmacy and healthcare retail provider. And they use the Azure Health Bot to find and use that to expand on their Find Care platform. So Walgreens, like many other retail pharmacies, have clinics within their pharmacies, and those are staffed by health system partners regionally within the U.S. And so added onto that Find Care platform, they added the COVID-19 risk assessment tool in order to help not only provide the insights and information that the CDC was providing, but then also take them from that triage, that assessment, and take them into the ability to help them find care at a location convenient to the patient. So Radanthi, turn it over to you to talk about the Middle East.
Great, thank you, Gregory. So now I'm going to also share my screen. In the next part of our session, we are going to talk about some case studies in the Middle East, and then Bert will take over and talk about some healthcare organizations that are using Azure Health Bot in Europe. So just like in the United States, Azure Health Bot empowers healthcare organizations in the Middle East and in Europe to build and deploy AI-powered, compliant, and conversational healthcare experiences at scale. We are going to talk about two case studies in the Middle East, one in Lebanon and one in the United Arab Emirates. And we are also going to see two quick live demos to see how the bot is actually working. Let's start with our first case study, the Daman Health Bot. Daman is the leading national health insurance company in the United Arab Emirates. Daman has collaborated with Microsoft to deploy their own bot, and that it is also bilingual. The bot asks a defined set of questions and follows specific protocols in providing patient assessments and symptom checking. And it also offers medical information and makes medical recommendations. We're also going to see that in just a few minutes in our live demo, but the Daman Health Bot can also advise patients to connect with the Abu Dhabi Department of Health, the United Arab Emirates Ministry of Health and Prevention, and also the Dubai Health Authority for further assistance. Let's now see
Sorry to interrupt you. Could you please, there's something wrong with the screen sharing. I think Gregory is still sharing. It's no problem, Gregory showed the slides, but if you could please take over, especially for the demos. There's no problem.
Let me also, great, let me try one more time. Okay, is it now?
Perfect.
All right, so now you can also see the website where the Daman Health Bot is deployed, and now we can see the Health Bot, and it is a coronavirus virtual doctor. It is actually an assessment tool to check any symptoms related to coronavirus. Also, very important, it also is stated here that the bot is only an alternative tool for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. And if you have serious symptoms or emergencies, you should consult a medical professional. Now we can see our bot here. We have an introduction text, and we have three possible options to choose from. For our quick live demo, we are going to take a COVID-19 self-assessment, which is only 5 questions, and it will be over in half a minute or even less. We also have two other options. We can ask the bot COVID-19 related questions or Daman services related questions. Okay, to see how the bot interacts with different scenarios that we give them, we are going to create a scenario that we have been in contact with someone who has coronavirus, and but we don't have any symptoms, to see what the bot is going to recommend us. Of course, for everyone who is going to use the bot, they are going to answer the questions correctly. Now we are going to just answer all the questions according to our own example scenario. All right, so now very, very quickly, I'm going to choose the COVID-19 self-assessment. Then we are going to answer a few questions. Have you recently traveled within the last 14 days? For our scenario, yes. Again, have you been in contact with someone who has traveled and it is now sick? Again, for our scenario, yes. Then have you been in contact with someone known to have coronavirus? Again, yes. And in the last few questions for this very quick self-assessment, we are going to answer that we don't have any symptoms of the following that the bot recommends us, like fever or cold, and so on. So no. And our last question, just so simple, is if the bot asks us if we are experiencing shortness of breath, which in our scenario we don't. And just like that, we have our result. It's very simple. We don't need to go to a hospital. We can be safe. The hospital staff can also be safe for this very, very easy self-assessment test through the Daman Health Bot that was developed with the Azure Health Bot. And we have our result that it states that it appears that you may be at risk for COVID-19, and then the bot redirects us to other accurate information centers, like the numbers of the Department of Health, the Ministry of Health and Prevention, and the Dubai Health Authority, so that we find out what the next steps are going to be and get accurate information about coronavirus and yet generally about health issues. So that was pretty much it. That was the very quick self-assessment. We can still ask the bot COVID-19 related questions or Dama service related questions. And let's go to our second example for case studies in Middle East, which is, let me go here.
And in the meantime, Radante, can I just answer one question we got from somebody in the chat? The question is, did any Blue Plan payer develop a fraud detection machine learning model to predict fraud COVID-19 claims? Well, if it's okay, I'll answer that one. Mm-hmm. I don't know any of the providers who created such a particular AI model, but what we know is that what we've seen is that several partners created dedicated AI models that then could be infused into the HealthBot. We have several already in the HealthBot where we're using, such as Infomedica, who is a triage model just to find, for example, the right outcome based on certain symptoms. And we have other partners who had similar COVID-19 AI models. The great thing about the healthcare bot is that you can easily integrate it via the APIs. So if there would be any payer who developed a fraud detection model, it would be very easy to embed it. And that's the strength of the HealthBot, that it's a platform, it's a Swift knife where you can add your own, let's say, details. Great. Back over to you.
Great. And if anyone has any other question, feel free to ask us, and Bert, Gregory, or myself will answer the question. So now let's move to the, again, second case study for the Middle East. That is the Ministry of Public Health in Lebanon has created a COVID-19 health bot based on Azure Health Bot. And the bot was developed by TrackMD along with the epidemiological surveillance and e-health teams of the Ministry of Public Health in Lebanon, and in accordance with the guidelines of the World Health Organization. The bot again has a symptom checker that simulates 6 scenarios, so users can take self-assessments to screen for potential infections. The bot can also identify high-risk patients aligned with medical procedures, and then direct those patients for further consultation and treatment in hospital facilities. Again, we can see, we can check a very quick live demo to see how this bot is working before we move on to the Europe case studies. Here we go. Here we can see the website that the other HealthBot is deployed for the Ministry of Public Health in Lebanon. The UI is a little bit different, but we still have an introduction text that states that it is a COVID-19 health bot. It states also the collaborations, for example, with the Microsoft Azure Health Bot team, with the track and be that the bot was developed, and again that it was in accordance with the guidelines of the World Health Organization. Again, there is a disclaimer that states that this bot is only for informational purposes, and it's not intended to constitute professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. In this scenario, we are going to answer the questions for the again quick self-assessment, a little bit different than in the Daman Health Bot. We are going to answer the questions like we haven't been in contact with someone with coronavirus, and also we don't have any symptoms, to see how the bot is going to understand our situation, how and what the final result is going to be. Again, I should also again mention that for anyone who's going to use it, for example, the residents of Lebanon, they're going to answer the correct answers to have an accurate result. All right, let's start. How old are you? It's the first question. I'm going to answer 20. The next question is about my gender. I'm going to choose the option female. Again, this is for the residents of Lebanon, so I'm going to choose as if I was there, so for example, Beirut, and I'm going to submit my answer. Again, very quickly, 5 answers for a very quick self-assessment. I don't have a fever in this scenario. I don't have any of the following symptoms. Again, I haven't been in close contact with a confirmed COVID-19 case. Again, I haven't traveled within the past 14 days. And that was it. Only 5 questions, very, very easy. And the result is something that we expected, that we don't need to worry about anything. We don't need to call the hotline at the time being, and we should stay home per the instructions provided by the government. And again, the bot redirects us to official websites, such as in this case the Ministry of Public Health in Lebanon or the World Health Organization, to get the official information and the answers of the possible COVID-19 related questions that we may have. And lastly, something very interesting that the team behind the bot has created, and the bot gives you this opportunity, is that there are, as you can see here, some tips and some steps to relieve anxiety during the home quarantine related to COVID-19, and some breathing techniques, for example, because mental health is incredibly important during this period of time, and the team that has created the bot understands that, and the scenario that we gave to the bot understands that we might be a little bit nervous or have anxiety because we don't have any symptoms. We haven't been in contact with someone with coronavirus, yet we still took the self-assessment. So the bot recommends us some very simple steps to help us. Lastly, we have again the coronavirus resources for official information about COVID-19, and again, if we need some hospitals for testing. And that was actually the two examples for case studies in Middle East. Bert, I think you can now take over and talk about some other very fascinating case studies in Europe.
Thanks. Before I share my screen, there's another interesting question from the audience, so keep them coming. And Gregory, can I ask you maybe to answer the question, how does the bot framework or the Azure Health Bot deals with different languages and localization? How is it handled?
Actually, that's an excellent question. So the Azure Health Bot actually has a localization manager built into the framework. So out of the box, the Azure Health Bot has 9 languages supported for default strings. So just the default messaging, default welcome message, if you will, stuff like that. And then the Informatica review of symptoms triage algorithm supports 17 languages. And then from a custom bot development perspective, the bot will actually support over, I want to say over 200 different languages and dialects. And that's just done, as part of the core development activities that are taken. And it's all well documented within the Azure Health Bot documentation, but that localization manager makes it super easy in order to manage multiple languages, and it's just a function of the how you develop the bot.
Yep, amazing. Thanks, Gregory. And maybe one last remark on that is the HealthBot is a backend service, so it has multiple channels where you can put the bot in. So that could be what we saw today, a web chat, but that could also be Microsoft Teams, or that could be an SMS. So that even if the HealthBot knows all those channels, you need to make sure that, for example, the open source web chat also support those languages. So keep that in mind when you're developing, that your front-end UI also understands all the languages that the HealthBot can provide. Another question, does the HealthBot only act based on multiple choice answers, or can it also work on NLP? If it's okay, I'm gonna quickly answer that question. It's a great question again. The things we saw today and most of the initial chatbots you see within providers are based on multiple choice or on buttons. And the reason that is because hospitals are starting on this journey and they want to know exactly what is answered on which button. It is perfectly possible to use NLP or NLU on this. The HealthBot can natively integrate with LUIS. So LUIS is our language understanding service, where you can create intents and utterances and you create your own models. And we have customers doing this. We have what we call runners or sprinter hospitals, one of the most innovative. And they use NLP, and they even use data they gathered from the HealthBot. They create, based on that data, they combine it with other data sources, and they create custom-made NLP models that then are used in the HealthBot. But what we see, or what I see, if I talk about Europe in my case, and maybe Gregory can then comment on the America and US, what I see in Europe is 90% of the hospitals starts with the journey where it's a fixed decision tree, where they can even disable bots because they see people going back in the scenario. So you need to make sure that you are fail-safing those things to make sure the bot is not saying every time, sorry, I don't understand, can you repeat? Gregory, do you have some extra remarks on that?
Yeah, actually, I mean, see similar things here in the U.S. The thing to remember is that not only multiple choice, yes, no responses, but those responses can be done, via, text input as well, which would be, common if you're using an SMS channel. But using the language understanding models, Q&A maker, for instance, you have the ability to really expand the conversational intelligence of the bot based on the use cases, the specific use cases for the organization.
All right, great. So without any ado, let us start with some new use cases within Europe. And I'll start in the Nordics, in the cold Finland, but it's a great country. So within Finland, we have HUS, also known as Helsinki University Hospital. And they're one of the largest providers in Finland. And we as Microsoft, we have the opportunity to work very closely with them. And they're also using the Azure Health Bot. They've been using it for years now. to create bots to help patients with various conditions, such as acne or social issues. And they use this bot currently very actively in what we call the Health Village platform. It's a platform based on different care paths, where you have a mental house or a diabetic house. And based on those dedicated houses, they also have dedicated scenarios to support their patients in a very personalized way. Even some of the scenarios are CE marked, meaning it's a medical device. So the HealthBot, the platform, is not a medical device, but you can use the platform inside a medical device, inside a medical software device. And for example, for certain skin conditions, they have CE marked it. And of course, in times of COVID, they have actively used this bot, which resulted in millions of messages per month to support their patients. And good to know is Rodanti showed you a couple of web chats. They also use the web chat, but it's interesting to see that what you see here on the screen is also the HealthBot, but they used the front end and they completely revamped it. So you can, as a partner or customer, completely modify the HealthBot within your own needs. Another interesting one is in Belgium is East Limburg Hospital, or ZOL. They call it in Dutch Ziekenhuis Oost-Limburg. They used the bot to create actually one to screen patients. So it's based on a questionnaire that determines the likelihood that a patient is infected with COVID-19 virus. So the bot helps the hospital to properly assess if there would be a potential outbreak, because they gather information and they get insights. Each questionnaire is not random, it's linked to a patient file. So the hospital can determine how many patients in the postal code. They're of course not going to do special AI or let's say research on the data of the patients, because that is not allowed, but they can do it on a more population health management. And the great thing is they use this very simple color coding system. So green, yellow, and orange to identify low risk, medium risk, and high risk patients. The hospital can then separate these patients based on the risk of infection. So it's a great system that they're using. And it has been used within Belgium, over 1 million messages a month for a small region. So it's very interesting to see how, let's say, how much impact this bot had. I see there's another question from the audience. I'm just going to read it. As I'm aware of the bot get the data from the user, did it also suggest the people suffering from COVID-19 nearby using the device location, so that the user will be aware of it and will avoid to go to that area where maximum number of COVID patients in that particular area? That's a great question. Let me start with answering, and Gregory or Rodanti, if you want to pitch in, don't hesitate. I'm going to cover later another case, but I can already give you some insights in. You can ask based on the web chat the geolocation, but because most of the hospitals at this point don't want too much patient data, because that means they have much more, let's say, responsibility of that data. They rather do this in an anonymous way. What some of the hospitals did, or even some of the countries did, is they added an optional form to ask, where are you from, where are you based, what's your postal code? And based on that, they exactly did what you said. They were proposing or giving information to all the people of their hospital saying, we see a high risk in this postal code. Don't go to this area. We see a high risk in that area. But this was optional, because if a hospital would start collecting your name, your social security number, or your geolocation, that means that the hospital has much more responsibility, because it knows who you are, and it needs to be very, very secure, and also it needs to be, at some points, a medical device. Rodanti, Gregory, do you want to add something on that?
Rodanti, you want to go first?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I cannot give many information about that, but if we saw in the Lebanon case study, in the live demo, that there was a question that where are you located for the residents in Lebanon, and we answered, for example, Beirut. But I think that was not, that was only for to suggest hospital locations for testing at the end of the self-assessment. So I'm not sure if there is, as you said, Bert, there is another possibility for that the patients can be safe, and yeah.
Thanks for that, Dean. Gregory?
So yeah, here in the United States, I'm aware of several government agencies, at the state level, where they provided dashboards, made dashboards publicly available, where you could see the based on testing information and the data collected during the testing process, where those hotspots were developing. But there is one health system that I'm familiar with intimately that actually went so far as to create their own visualization based on patient data. Now, they kept it anonymized. They didn't give it down to the GPS coordinate level, but you could definitely see based on the patient data that they had and the testing that had been conducted, where you could look at a county and you could actually see where those hotspots were for COVID-19 infections. So that was based on patient data, is my understanding, and it was a great visualization because it provided that. And with geolocation, you can track all that information, through the use of the bot. But then, of course, your HIPAA, high trust, GDPR, all of the local privacy and compliance, considerations need to be given with how that data is not only used but shared, in tools like a COVID-19 hotspot dashboard.
Great questions, great answers. Keep them coming. Thanks, Gregory. Thanks, Rodolphe. I'll jump to the next one. So we went from Finland to Belgium, and now we're going back to the Nordics, where we go to Sweden. And this is an interesting one, which I'm very closely connected. I'm very proud of what the team of Capio did. Is they started last year in February with the HealthBot, and I tried to put some kind of timeline in there. So they started very simple, and what we saw in the initial demos, what Rodolphe showed, is with a COVID-19 assessment. This is a static decision tree, so you have a question and answer, and you know exactly where you point out. And this was also based on the CDC guidelines of the United States, but then we modified this based on the European and the Swedish regulation. So they started with this HealthBot, and they saw a massive uptick because they are one of the biggest private healthcare organization in the Nordics. They also reached to France because they're part of Ramsay. And based on that uptake, they saw also a decrease in questions to the hospitals, but they also saw the need to extend the features into the HealthBot. One of them was after they provided objective information, there were some patients who were always, or not always, who were at high risk. So what to do with those high-risk patients? So they could not give medical advice because it was not a medical bot. It was a bot to give guidance. So what they did is they enabled a feature which could enable self-observation. So when you've done the scenario, at the end of the scenario, they created a feature where you could add and optionally get a unique identifier. Let's call it a token, just a simple string you could write down, and the next day you could provide that information to the bot. So that means is when you think you have COVID or you want to provide that information somewhere, the bot could proactively notify you, or you could go to the website and say, I want to provide my observation for today, my temperature, if I'm coughing, how I'm feeling. And that data is then put into what we call a FHIR server. So what is FHIR? FHIR is actually a healthcare, it's not a Microsoft tool, it's a standard from HL7 to store medical data. FHIR stands for Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resource. And the reason why we store this data into FHIR is because it can be easily migrated, or the data can be exported and imported back into the medical record. And because the HealthBot has native support for FHIR, it was very easy for them to integrate those self-observations into the FHIR database. We didn't store patient data, we linked it to the unique identifier. And the great thing is, if the patient would then unfortunately be admitted, then the patient could use that identifier to say to the physician, you can retrieve the data into a format your medical record can understand, in the right coding, the right SNOMED and ICD-10 coding and the LOINC, and that data could be easily integrated. The next step Capio then did, and as I said at the beginning, this is a step-by-step journey. So they started small, they added FHIR, and then they added a single sign-on. So within Sweden, you have Bank ID or Freya. That's a way to authenticate. It's well known by the audience or by the citizens and the patients. So they linked Freya into the HealthBot, which means when you use the bot framework, it's very easy to use authentication providers with OpenID. So you can ask, I do server-to-server communication, or you can say to the HealthBot, I want, if you're going to ask this question, that the user is authenticated. So they added Freya, and then they started to use this Freya internal identifier to link to a patient FHIR, meaning the data was always pseudonymized, and the HealthBot, only the HealthBot who could log in into Freya with the token of the user could fetch the right FHIR information. And then they went a step further and added more functionality. So we had some observation, we had static information. Well, then they started to add how to change the care units, because everybody was at home, and Capio has a lot of care units, let's say physical units. When you move to another location, you need to change care units. But with COVID, you couldn't do that. So they added that functionality. They added languages, and I'll show that in a second. They added Dari, English, Swedish, all of the different languages. And they didn't need to revamp their scenarios. They just needed to add more language to the HealthBot, and the HealthBot would then change the scenarios itself. And then, of course, they extended it with the vaccine, the COVID-19 test, the antibody test. They even used it in the mass vaccination. And now we're actually also working on a patient personal app. So that went live in December. It's now going to France also, where they're monitoring patient with hypertension. So when there's a patient who has high blood pressure, the bot is embedded in an application and can proactively ping the user to ask how it's doing, provide information about the current hypertension care path it needs to do, medication information, and they can change it very fast. This is not something they need to develop weeks or days on it. If they want to change the scenario of an outcome, they can easily change it in the visual editor of the HealthBot and update their patient personal app. So that's a bit on the Capio, let's say, information. I'll show a demo, but I also see there are some questions, and I'll answer the questions in a second. I'll just show very fast on how that looks like. So this is the Capio site. So let me refresh the page just to be completely sure. It loads. So this is the Capio Corona call, or for the vaccination, and you see this is all in Swedish. So this is, as I mentioned, there are different languages. So we have English, French, Arabic. So even if I do Dari, let me click a couple of times through, it even goes from right to left or left to right. And I think this is right to left. I'm not sure because I don't speak Dari. But for the sake of this, let's say, demo, let me do it in English. So they have only on the main site, you have only these. But because this bot, this is one HealthBot, so one scenario, but this bot is deployed with one script on more than 100 websites. Depending on which website, you have more or less functionality. On the main website, you only have, let's say, information on the vaccination or the Corona call. If I say, for example, information, it asks me for the city. So let me see if it recognizes Stockholm. So the region Stockholm, which is the capital, I will say confirm. And as I said before, this is only buttons because we want to know the users navigate in the right way. And Capio is currently working on NLP, but this is all new. But you see, we're also blocking previous buttons to make sure they're not clicking on it again. And here the bot asks, would you want to subscribe? Do you want information? If I say subscribe, for example, it asks on which of the sites am I subscribed? If I would be on the right side, it would not ask this question. It would know, okay, you come from Lindigo, from this site, from this care unit. And then it gives you a form to fill that in. You can also provide validation information. The HealthBot also has support for what we call adaptive cards. So if you have an adaptive card, you can easily embed it and use it within the chatbot. So that's a small demo. Let me just go into the questions. Let's start with the first one. And Gregory or Rodanti, feel free to pick in. Let me see. Does a bot provide advice from the legal point of view? So you mentioned HIPAA compliant. How does the bot knows the law? So the bot, based on the regulations we know, in the US, we have HIPAA, HIPAA, which is needed for healthcare data. In Europe, we have GDPR. So there are several fixed, let's say, security and laws. The bot already has support for those. To give an example, GDPR, you can ask the bot natively, what information do you know? The bot will give you all of the information based on how you implement it. Could be on a cookie, could be on a user identifier. You can also say, I want to be forgotten, meaning the bot can forget everything he learns about you and give you a trigger, so you need to delete the elements in your backend. The same for HIPAA. The HealthBot team has been putting all validations and technical guidelines into the platform to make sure it confirms to that spec, so you can use it with that kind of data. Gregory, or Rodante, do you have a comment on that?
I just want to add into that, Bert, real quick. So each organization is ultimately responsible for how they build their bot and what they do with it, and so they're ultimately responsible for ensuring compliance. The HealthBot platform, has a lot of robust capabilities, API connectivity to backend databases, for instance, and those need to be secured as well. So while the platform does support and compliance with over 50 certifications and privacy requirements around the globe, it's ultimately up to the organization to make sure that the patterns and practices they're using to develop their bot are in compliance with those local regulations.
Thanks, Gregory. For the sake of time, I'll go to the next scenario. Keep the questions coming. If we're at the end of the presentation, we can definitely answer other questions if they arise. So let's go to Denmark. And this was also a very interesting one. With Denmark, there's a number called 1813, and that's where you call for medical information for help. You can see it as a 911, but then for Denmark, it's somewhat aligned for emergency ICU. And our team had a call with the director of Capital Region, where they saw massive uptakes in calls, again, yes, in COVID. So they had about 30% or 40% increase every day, and their call center was already full. So there were people waiting on the phone, didn't get an answer, even if it was not for COVID, but the lines were just flooded. Because people were uncertain, this was all information they had. They didn't know how to respond. When do I know I'm infected? Where do I need to go? Where is it safe? What do I need to do when I'm infected? So what we did is, again, the same what we did in Capio and with others. We started with a simple objective, let's say, COVID assessment tool based on the CDC guidelines, modified based on the regulations and the guidelines of the medical people in region Hovedstaden, which is the main capital. And we created a HealthBot. And within the first week, they saw a dramatic increase in the calls in the call center, a 30% increase, and a massive increase in the bots. Meaning people went to the bot because they got a direct information. And what they started to do is, and it's a bit small on the screen because it contains data from the hospital, so we don't want to share that, that's their information. But based on the scenario, you see some green and red circles. They actually went to the scenario and created insights on that. So they knew in a certain region based on the optional form. So they had an optional form where they asked, what's your gender, what's your age, what's your location? And based on that, they could know the flow of the bot and say, okay, this female from 22 years old says she has a cough and a fever, and this male from 23 also in the same region. So at some point they could detect hotspots based on all the information of the bot they got in an anonymized way. So they could predict also on where to put the staffing to say, okay, in the north or in the south, there's going to be more because we detect or we see that people tend to say they're getting sick. And within a couple of weeks, we started with the region Hoofdstad. We scaled through the whole country. So all of the regions adopted the same bot, went to the same HealthBot. They got massive more information, and they started adding more, let's say, intelligence. And good to know is they're now using this data with other data sources to keep improving the platform. So, without ado, we had use cases from the United States, from Gregory, from the Middle East, from Rodanti. I did some European cases. Let's do some questions. So, on the sake of time, let's do 2 questions, and let's start with the first one. I'll read it, Rodanti, and if you could maybe go through them and answer them. People in the chat, feel free to answer. It will be great to see if a lot of people understood what we said. So let's start. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, or the CDC, in the United States used Azure Health Bot during the COVID-19 pandemic. What use cases were implemented through the bot? A. Assess the symptoms and risk factors of people worried about infection. B. Provide information and suggest a course of action, such as contacting a medical provider. Or C. Advise how to manage an illness safely at home for those who didn't need in-person medical care. Or D. All of the above. Rodanti, what do you think?
Well, I think Gregory showed us the case study for the CDC, and we also saw some examples for in the Middle East and also in Europe that that said that I think all three, all A, B, and C is might be the correct answers, because we can the bot can assess our symptoms and they can suggest a course of action. Either we should contact a medical provider, or C, we should manage the illness safely at home. So my answer, I think, and I hope that other people agree with me, is probably the D.
Let's check and let's hope people got the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is, let's see, exact D. Very good, Rodanti.
Mm-hmm.
Next one. So Gregory talked about Walgreens, and they use the Azure Healthcare Bot. Can somebody who uses their HealthBot know if their symptoms require medical care? Yes or no?
Well, again, I think, Bert, we saw in various case studies, also in Walgreens and also in the Daman HealthBot, for example, that you can, the bot asks for our symptoms, or we can type in our symptoms, and then the bot can understand or if we don't have anything to worry about, or if we should contact a hospital, for example. So my answer is going to be yes. So
all right, let's see what this gives. Hope the people in the chat got the same answer. Correct, it's yes. Perfect. So again, these are 2 questions. If you don't got them right or we were too fast, you can all revisit them on the interactive learning course, and the link will be provided. So as a summary, what we saw today is health organizations around the world are using our Azure Health Bot to improve patient outcomes and reduce costs. So we have partners who build bots, who integrated their, let's say, AI on that, or maybe integrated their backends. So I hope the examples in this module showed you what is possible. If you want to watch the customer stories again, or you want to read them again, they're all in the Azure Health Bot customer stories. So thanks for joining. Thanks for attending the session. Thanks, Rodanti, and thanks, Gregory, for co-hosting with me today. And join us back here on our next Learn Live sessions. We will look forward to seeing you then. But before I say have a great day, let me see if there's some other questions, because I see we have still some time. Is there another question? Let me see. I see one here from the audience. What's the scope of the Azure Health Bot? And it's a very good question. I'll give a go at it. Gregory or Rodanti, feel free to chip in. So when I have the conversations with my customers and partners, I always say, look, if you have the right development team, a big development team, and enough years, you can rebuild the HealthBot. It's a platform for healthcare, let's say for the healthcare, mostly providers, but also payers, to start from day one, but to have all the integration, compliance, medical intelligence to provide patient experiences without having to create a bot from scratch. You could do it perfectly with the bot framework, but then you will need to start from scratch, develop all the features, go through all the processes to make it compliant, and to all the processes to integrate with the back of the customers. So the scope is healthcare customers and start from day one in the most effective and secure and compliant way. Gregory, Rodanti?
I'll let Rodanti go first if you wanted to add in anything.
Well, Bert, I don't have anything to add. I see we have some other questions coming in. I'm not sure if Gregory, you want to add something or ask or answer another question.
Sure. I think I think Bert covered the initial question, very well. Each customer implementation has its own unique set of requirements, and there's actually on GitHub a very substantial reference architecture that's out there and available. So incorporating Q&A Maker, incorporating Azure Functions, there's a lot of stuff that you can do in order to build out a comprehensive solution. And so that's the only thing I wanted to add in there. And in the time left, there's a question I see that came in. Does the HealthBot come already integrated with any databases of medicine information? And so Medline Plus is actually one source of information from, I believe it's the National Library of Medicine. And so that is one of the built-in language models that is built into the Azure Health Bot. And, but at the same time, for organizations that are using something like Crames or Wolters Kluwer, those models, as long as they're API accessible, can be incorporated into the Azure Health Bot as well.
Great. I see we're almost out of time. So again, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks Greg and Rodanti for co-hosting this with me. Have a great day and join us back here on our next Learn Live sessions. We look forward to seeing you then. Have a great day.
And if there's any questions that haven't been answered at this point, feel free to reach out to Bert, Rodanti, or myself. We'll be glad to address these questions offline. As we all have a lot of experience with the Azure Health Bot, working with customers around the globe. So thank you all very much for your time today.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.